Fine. Right, so I want to say welcome to my panel. I'm Pandora Chi, and this panel is about me giving you tips on how you can actually potentially save on those cosplays which you might think that is way too expensive. I definitely can't afford that. The first bit about this panel is about me kind of like giving you tips about where you can save on like buying the fabrics and haberdashery in the first place. And then the rest of the panel will be about me showing you fairly like cheap pattern tips and also some fairly like cheap techniques as well. Just in case some of you like want to get more of an idea of what I mean by fancy cosplays or not aware of some of the things that I've made, this is a segment of things that I've actually made over the years, which actually involved me budgeting quite a lot on like putting like fine details into cosplays. And I basically wanted to show you that it is actually really possible to keep to quite a strict budget and you actually create details like this. And the biggest tip that I can give you now is quite a bit of the techniques I will show you is quite labour intensive. So it's the type that makes you lose your sleep, makes you probably like lose your fingers, hands, that sort of thing. Well, like not well, hopefully not exactly like that. But as far as I'm aware, I don't know a single cosplayer who is a little bit of a masochist. So like you should be fine with this with detailing. So, first of all, fabric and haberdashery saving tips. Shopping tips. First tip I can give you. Look out for discount days and coupons. So there are some high street stores and even some websites where they would kind of offer the odd day in the year where it will be kind of like 10% off, 20% off, 15% off. If you know of a high street store that's like, well, if you know of like one of the fabric stores that are near you, I would recommend you go into one of those on like that day if it's possible. Because even if it's like a smaller percentage, it's still a bit of like a percentage. There's even places online such as like Minamicon, where if you sign up for a whole year for about £20, you can actually get like for the whole year 10% off all orders. And also there's this one, like there's a few days in the year where it's like 20% off as well. So it's always kind of like worth researching into those like kind of websites. Random parts of goods. So this one is about, like, as far as I'm aware, some fabric stores hold kind of like the odd kind of cut-off, like, and I guess in a bit of like this kind of like cage and stuff, where they were kind of like where they basically are like cut-offs, where it's off the roll. There's no point to keep like this fabric on the roll because there's only a metre of it left, or there's like a slight imperfection with it, say like a dot, or there's like a little dirt mark, and because of that, these will be reduced at a much more cheaper rate than as opposed if you were to buy it off the roll. I mean, if you're really lucky, depending on who the seller is, they could even like make it even cheaper. There was one time when I bought something from a market and you like intended to get like a metre of it. There was about like probably something about a dirt mark about this big, very small, and the seller noticed this and said that, tell you what, I'll charge you 2 meters. I'll give you 2 meters, but I'll only charge you for the 1 meter. So you could get very, very lucky. Visit markets and even have them. So, as from my experience, even though markets don't really have the biggest range of fabrics sometimes, they're actually really good for haberdashery, and they can like have some really unusual kind of like trimmings. They even have things kind of like, it's really worth stocking up kind of like things like zips, like buttons, quick unpickers, that sort of thing, for absolutely like next to nothing. And if you're brave enough, there's no harm to kind of like ask the seller, like if you know you're buying quite a bit from them, is it possible to kind of like get it a little bit more cheaper? Because at the end of the day, the worst they will say is pretty much no, but it's always worth it. Charity shops. So we all know that charity shops hold second-hand items, and these can be really good for if you wanted to find like a base pair of of shoes. You wanted to find like even like massive pieces like curtains that someone donated away, which you can use as your fabrics. Then you have obviously clothes that you can also like use for your cosplays. And the odd occasion you might find that they even have like someone could give away a lot of buttons they don't need anymore, like beads. They can even have like bags of like zips. Like it basically is totally worth it just for you to kind of like search for even the smallest little items. Bundles and on a project. So this one is mainly kind of like to save on like travel costs. Because if you're anything like me, where you're not that lucky to be living anywhere near where a fabric store is, you have to kind of go out a little bit. And like what I tend to do is that I either plan like for one really big project and only kind of set my mind on like just buying for that one project, or let's see, or like I tend to buy like for about like maybe 3 tiny little projects, or like I just look out for, I'm not doing this project now, but that could also be quite useful. This one is a bit of a least common one, but like it is possible, because I don't know about you, I'm pretty sure about 85% of my friends list are actually cosplayers. So, so there is bound to be that one friend that you talk to that has this kind of fabric that you might actually need. This actually happened to me once when I was like talking to a friend, and I was saying that, okay, I need a bit of this red chiffon, about half a metre, less than half a metre. But I was like, I don't really want to wait, like, I don't really want to go out again, but I didn't really want to wait to actually like get it through post, and have to pay for delivery, that sort of thing. And then they said that, well, I've got some red chiffon that you can actually borrow. If I just send it to you, you can just cut off whatever you want. And then they just literally just like didn't ask for any money for it. And I was like, wow, this is actually really, really good. Like, you know, I should do that more often. So like, keep that in mind as well. So recycled parts. So going back to what I mentioned about like charity shops, when I look at like a cosplay, the best thing I tend to think about is what parts do I have that I already have that I don't actually need to spend more money for. And this is actually what happened with this cosplay that I'm actually wearing right now, because aside from the tie I actually admittedly brought, but it was only £4, so I just literally just cut it to like a good length I needed. But pretty much everything else apart from this jacket I actually already have. So just a bit. So the trousers I had, boots I already had, this was recycled off from some scrap fabric that I already had, and like this shirt actually came off from another cosplay. And like therefore, the only thing that I was left like to do was actually make this jacket, which actually came out a lot more cheaper like when I needed it at the time to actually make it for this con. Keep scraps big and small. So I'm a bit of a fabric hoarder, and what I tend to do is that after a project, I basically hoard about like maybe over like if fabric is over about 3/4 of a metre, I tend to keep that because I know that will be quite useful for something else later. I tend to keep slightly smaller pieces, so like something that's like less than 1/4, I tend to not really keep. I tend to just like throw out. But smaller scraps can actually come in really handy for a slide that I will show you a little bit like later about why it's good to actually keep those. And this one, well, I'm a bit OCD, and I tend to kind of like keep track of how much I actually spend with each cosplay. It's just for sanity reasons as well, that I kind of like know that if I broke the bank, or if I'm kind of like, it's all right, I can still spend a little bit more on this cosplay. Going from buying all your like fabrics and haberdashery, next we have patterning. Look out for X% off deals. So you've probably seen around that in some certain kind of like websites or like some like high street stores, they always do these kind of like a slight percentage off like these off patterns. They do 50% off, seen them do 25% off, 40% off. And this is actually the best time for you to actually buy the pattern, because if you've ever seen the actual real retail price of a pattern, it's really expensive. It could be like £8 for like this packet of paper, basically, what it is. So I would say that it's always kind of like worth looking out for like when everything goes on sale, because I tend to find it goes around sale maybe around the summertime and around like especially around Halloween time as well. Try and pick a versatile pattern. So when I look at like a pattern, I've noticed this for quite a bit, that sometimes they have the exact same kind of like pattern, but then there's like slight little alterations for it. Like they have like pieces which vary. Like I don't know, it's like this one piece has like a cape. This other kind of like similar pattern in the same block has like something like they have a pair of gloves with it. But it's always worth you kind of like looking at each of these patterns and be really careful which one like you pick, just so that it'll be more worth your money. Like it depends on like what parts like would benefit you for your costume. And never cut the commercial pattern. So when I buy a commercial pattern, I never ever cut the actual real thing up, because this is just in case that, like, say if you completely like basically screwed up the actual pattern that you brought, then you have to basically just go out and let you buy like another one. So what I do, like so, is I traced like a pattern, and then because I've got a copy of that pattern, I can really do whatever the hell I want with it. and it wouldn't really matter. And plus, because I know the original is safe, you can actually still like go back to tracing it and alter it however you want. Okay. Of course, like Google it.
Yeah.
That is obviously one of the cheapest ways. We all know the internet is a fantastic kind of resource for kind of like looking up like tutorials. There's like brilliant, I mean there's some like patterns which you don't even need a pattern for, such as like you make something like circle skirts. Like even when you make gloves as well in like the easy way, you don't actually need like that much of a complex pattern for that. Even like YouTube has like absolutely some really amazing tutorials. You can even have a go at even making like a pattern block yourself if you want to. Basically, it's always like just literally worth googling it before you go out and spend money on like buying a pattern. Okay. And basically, this is just to show you that was what I mean by versatile pattern. For this one pattern, I literally because of, like there's slight variations on the closings, variations on the collar. I basically use this one pattern to replicate every single one of these jackets that you see on screen. And even in fact, this shirt and this jacket are actually made from this pattern itself. So, like this, I had like, because the other thing that's great about this pattern is because it has a lot of panels to it. When there's like something that's a lot of panels, it's a lot more well fitted to your body. And because this cosplay I was making, it had several, I don't know, gazillion panels. It was like well, probably one of the most complicated like things I've ever done. And not sure if you noticed, but there's a panel here, panel here, panel here, sleeves obviously, and then if I turn around, don't mean to be rude. So there's also more paneling for the back here, and also more like going down there. And even this tab was on the black piece as well. But it's just goes to show you that you can actually be quite creative if you just use this one pattern, because as soon as you get the fitting just right, like you could literally create like things that, well, if you're a jacket lover like me, which is pretty obvious, then like you can actually make like one of these like just by using the one. Okay, so those scraps. Why do I say they're important? Okay, mock-ups. Before I begin any kind of big project, I tend to really like to create like a mock-up because I always worried that like if I cut up the actual like really nice like fabric, I would waste it and then I would pretty much like, screw it up. So this is why I say a mock-up is always really, really important for these kind of things. First of all, they're perfect for showing how the fabric piece kind of drapes. So this is an example of something that I made last year where the back had this really nice cascading kind of effect, and because I tend to like struggle with how things drape, it was really worth me kind of like experimenting with scraps on how I can actually get the back right. And I think I must have drafted that like about 3 times before I was actually happy with the pattern that I got. Mock-ups are also really good for like if you need to kind of like write on it. So when I wear the mock-up, what I tend to do is that I tend to get like something like a Sharpie and literally write notes on it. So I tend to kind of like say this. So for example, this needs to be shortened. There needs to be like lengthened here. This needs to be taken in. Those kind of things, because it helps you kind of like remember what you need to do next time you kind of like when you want to alter the mock-up again. Small scraps can be used for like tinier pieces. So going back to what I mean by it's worth keeping like the smaller scraps. I did this for when I was making like a collar. It was like, and on this method that to make a collar, another way that you can actually make is like to duct tape. Is like the duct tape method, where you basically like put duct tape over the area that you want like a pattern for. Then you put tape over it. You basically use Sharpie to draw over that, and then because of that, you've got like a pattern, and that's how I created like the collar. That method also is very good for if you were to make like a garment, such as like you can either make like a corset out of it, like and it's like. But if you were to make like a full garment, such as a corset or like something else a bit more restrictive, I would recommend you have a second person, just so that someone's there to actually cut you out in emergencies. And the other second thing is make sure that the person that you're asking you are comfortable with, because there's not many friends that I can actually honestly say, hey, do you mind like taking up and touching me for an hour? I mean, probably have to give them a bit of context first, but just so they're aware. Scraps always go for colour. So this is this, like, as you can probably tell, it's this jacket that I'm wearing. And because there are so many pieces to this like jacket, and because I use about like 4 different types of light fabrics, I was not going to be able to keep track while sleep deprived of where I would actually be sewing the real, like, these pieces for the real thing. So what I did was that I was like saying, okay, this sparkly fabric is green, this red fabric is purple, and like so forth. And that's why I said that it's also worth you keeping quite a few different colours as well for your scraps. Right, moving on, we got from patterns, we've got fabric tips. So basically, like what's available normally would be like cotton or satin kind of bias tape. But if you fancy something that's a little bit more kind of like special, like you might want to kind of delve into making like your own bias tape, which is actually a lot more simpler than it actually looks. There is tutorials out there on how you can actually make them. And like the other thing is that the more unusual the fabric of like the bias tape, the more likely the people will literally sell it at like an extortionate price for like a meter. So something like this kind of fabric, like that would probably cost about like something about £1.50 or something like £2 a meter potentially. And if you needed something like more than 5 meters of it, that is pretty expensive. So what I did is that I basically paid for like a meter of fabric, which was about, I think it was about £7 at the time, which might seem like quite a lot, but through that 1 meter of fabric, I managed to get about 20 meters worth of bias tape, which was actually a lot more worth it than actually spending like just meter by the meter. Alright, well this is Inigo, my precious child, and one day I fancied making his yukata. First thing I was thinking, like, okay, so he's got flowers, because why not? And I thought, how do I go about making the flowers? First thing I did not want to do was like was hand paint them, because I thought that would just literally just annoy me. It's the fact that it's not any messy, but I have to get the colours right. And I knew that it was just going to seep through like the cotton as well. I was just like, no, I'm not doing that. The other idea was to custom print the fabric, but that would be really expensive as well. So then what I ended up doing in the end was that I looked up t-shirt transfer paper, which works really well for kind of cotton fabrics. And I basically played around with a vector, played around with the colours of it, and I basically printed it off in like 5 different sizes, and I painstakingly sat there to cut around every single one of those by hand. And it was, even though it was super, super painful, I quite liked the effect of it. And if you've never played with t-shirt transfer paper before, these are like two kind of like, this is like a sample of it, where if you peel the backing off of it, it's got a slight kind of like vinyl feel to it. And also with me, I actually have the actual thing which I tied up just to show you like a bit of a segment of it. So pass that back. Just to show that what the effect will give when you actually like mix up kind of like when you play around with kind of like gradients to add like a little bit more detail. So at the time when I made this shirt, I didn't actually know there was actually such a thing as heat transfer vinyl. So, but then even if I did, I would have thought that it would have been quite expensive, because if you needed quite a fair amount of it, it will actually cost you quite a bit. So then the method that I chose was that, because I needed 2 different contrasts of gold, I ended up, for the top like bit of the gold, used, basically ironed a bit of bonder web, and also, I had to cut each of those out by hand as well. I had to cut that out by hand, and then I basically ironed it on. But I also kept that like baking paper on top when I ironed it. You also be very careful when you use something like PVC or something like spandex, because like it could burn. So you have to test like your irons to make sure it's okay. Just make sure it's like an okay temperature. And the other reason was that you use a non-frayed fabric to make this job a lot more easier as well. This is what I did for this shirt. And it's exactly what I did for the mannequin with the gold detailing here as well. Because it made it so much more easier for me to kind of like at least sew it down and also add detail to it where I needed it to. flowers. So these two are, as far as I'm aware, they can be both as cheap as each other with the kind of methods, but there's advantages to both of those. So first of all, I want to talk about the pre-made flowers, which is the piece that I've got here. And like what I wanted to do with this was that I actually, when you make pre-made flowers, you can control the colours and you can control the fabric that you're actually that you're using in order to create like these flowers. And making these flowers was actually really, really easy, because what I did was that like I cut up like strips of rectangles, and I basically held them over like a flame candle. And then because of that, that's how they're curling up to create this really beautiful effect. After that, I then got out the good old glue gun, because well, what cosplay doesn't use a glue gun? And so that's it's definitely an idea you can actually really definitely invest into. For that reason. Equally, with pre-made flowers, I tend to try and stay away from flowers that are ridiculously cheap, because sometimes the quality of it is not really that nice. But at the same time, it gives me ideas on how you can actually create a bit more detail with these kind of flowers. So you can add kind of glitter lining. You could also add two different colours as well. And my helper over there is wearing the flower crown, which has actually a little bit of detailing in that one as well. And you also look really close at the flower crown. There is actually little droplets to make it look wet, which I actually use clear fabric glue on, which is also another idea, adding very subtle detail that can actually be really effective when you want to bling up flowers. Red tips. So, well, I discovered this when my overlocker kind of gave away, and I was thinking, but I wanted a really, really light hem. So then I thought to myself, what can I do? So I used a tight zigzag stitch, which is used for applique, and it actually worked really well to actually create this rolled hem effect, which is a really, really delicately light hem for very light fabrics, just to keep the floatiness of it. And it's basically, even if you have to go over, you might have to go over it more than once, it's actually quite effective, and because it's just your sewing machine, it's it's obviously quite easy to create as well. Fake buttonholes. So this is something I discovered when, halfway through sewing one side of the buttonhole, my button ran out. So then I was just left with this one line of this side two buttonholes, thinking, what on earth can I do with it? Because after you do a buttonhole, it's absolutely impossible to unpick it unless you really want to torture yourself and sit there. But then what I did is that I used tug zigzag stitch to create a buttonhole, because because it's just a buttonhole, it's it's not very noticeable anyways, and it works just as well as if you were to just do a fake buttonhole. And going on for buttons as well, there's such a thing as self-cover buttons. If you wanted to kind of match a fabric with it, to the garment, which I've done here, and these are really, really brilliant because they're so simple. All you have to do is just cut out a piece of circle, then you hand sew a straight stitch around the edges, gather that, and then literally just plop it onto one of these. If you've never seen one of these, they become two parts. And the other great thing is, I would actually recommend this brand Hemline, because depending on what size button you've got, they've actually got a guide at the back of how big you can actually cut your circle, so it actually makes it a lot more easier for you to determine how much fabric you are supposed to really gather for it. If you don't like buttons, no harm trying studs. They're very, very easy, come in different sizes, and typically I think they come in mostly silver and gold, but I think you've seen some in black and also bronze as well. This is what I did for when I created these, when I needed to create these tabs, because I was a bit well, I'm a bit too lazy to do buttonholes. Let's just press studs into them, and it worked actually just as well. Got a sample here in case anyone wanted to see these kind of studs. rhinestones. So you probably gathered that I'm a bit of a rhinestone nerd. And I can tell you that, like, well, as much as Swarovski would be really nice, they are bloody expensive. So not really ideal for if you're trying to keep to a tight budget. And as far as I'm aware, there's only two types on like the market that are the cheapest. One is the absolute cheapest is acrylic and resin rhinestones, and the other is DMC rhinestones. Acrylic and resin rhinestones are typically made of like more plasticky kind of like elements, and so the shine wouldn't be as great. But if it was DMC rhinestones are made of glass a lot of the time, so they'll have a lot more of a shine to it. I've also got like a sample here of like showing you the difference between DMC and also the resin rhinestones. And like one of the things you might notice right away, even though the shine might be a bit hard to see, is that DMC rhinestones have a lot more facings on them. So therefore there's like kind of like more light to reflect on it. But there's no harm for you to use like acrylic resin rhinestones if you really are like I can't really spend it all. Because like if you're already not careful, this is from my experience, the rhinestones could actually cost you more than the actual cosplay itself. And so just to show you a few details. This cosplay that I've got here, I actually used resin rhinestones for that, and it actually gives like a really subtle kind of like shine to it. So it's no harm for you to want to use like resin rhinestones as opposed to like DMC ones. Okay, so if you are going to be investing a lot into kind of like rhinestones like I have, basically the best one of the best methods is like you buy a fairly like big bottle, and you also buy like an empty needle nozzle, which is like what I've got here. And I've got like a little sample of this needle nozzle bottle. And this needle nozzle bottle is so great for like if you were to apply kind of like little tiny bits, just so you can control where the glue goes. And plus they're actually really cheap to get as well. If you just, all you do is just buy the one, and then you're literally just set just to like rhinestone as much as you want. So silicone putty. This is something I discovered when I use in order for me to apply the rhinestones, I use something called like a jewel picker, and it's basically is a pen with like a little like sticky nib on the end of it. But then one day, what I did was that I accidentally ripped off like the end of it, and I was like, well, shit. So what do I do? Then what I did is I discovered there was such a thing as silicone putty, which is this pink thing here. I don't know why it's pink, but it's pink. And it's like the thing, I've got like a little sample here, which is basically, it's quite sticky, so you could easily just get a little bit, roll on the end of something like a pencil, a cocktail stick, and it worked just as well, just as like a little picker. And plus, like the other thing is, it's ridiculously cheap as well, because I went on AliExpress when I discovered these, and I found that for a pack of 10 of them, they were like 89p or something, really, really cheap, and I haven't even used one square, and I've probably like must have rhinestone about 2,000 rhinestones by now. Okay, rhinestone colour change. This is just to give you a tip on how you can change like the one colour. Say if you had this clear rhinestone, but you wanted it in like purple or something, then there is methods to actually like colour them. I've got also like a little sample here to show you. This one, like more on my left, so I guess, is a resin rhinestone, which I use Sharpie for. DMC rhinestone, I use glass paint for. And then, I know the one like furthest away is not like a rhinestone, but cabochons are really, really amazing for if you wanted to like put nail varnish at the back of it. And I'm not sure if some of you noticed, but when I turned around, I actually had a cabochon at the back of my jacket, and I actually used like nail varnish to actually make that shine. Even on this mannequin here, I've actually got like a little cabochon, which is what is creating that kind of little shine. Okay, so beads and also flat pearl beads are like, both of those are actually just as cheap as each other, as far as I'm aware. But I would recommend that flat pearl beads are, well, they can work for both opaque fabrics and all, but some form like that's more sheer. If you were to use something that's flat pearl, I would recommend you use that opaque because they're meant to be glued down. But like, personally, I prefer like the flat pearls because they're a lot more easier and less pain in the ass, and you have to sit there just to like hand sew every single one of these. But that's like an extra idea you can use like towards your garment. And finally, I've got this panel, this slide, which is about how you can replicate, like if you were to do a lot of resin casting. So this method I kind of discovered when I basically needed a lot of these kind of starches for a dueling glove that I made like ages ago. And like the problem was, I had this really really kind of a hard plastic kind of like base, but the problem was because it was going to be on a curved kind of edge, it was going to kind of like stick out a bit, which is what I didn't really want. So when you resin cast something, it's actually a lot more like rubbery surface, so it actually works for like a lot more rounded surfaces. It's also really good, and like resin casting, even though it might seem a little bit pricey, because it's like effectively what it is that like it's like a small, you can like buy like different packs of the different volumes, and I think like the cheapest pack they've done is probably about like £9, £10 or something, which has 2 bottles. If you mix both of them together, that's how it creates like the resin for it. Even though, yeah, it might seem maybe a little more the pricey kind of like range, it's really worth it if you know that you're going to be doing like a lot of like resin casting. So I'll completely like recommend it, and be that way you can also control what colours you use as well, like that sort of thing, and also like the shape as well. As for the moulds, at the time I used something that was, well, it was a little bit pricey, which is something called silicone, which is like a 2-part putty where you mix together and it hardens, and that's what creates the mould. But I know my friend who used, I think she went to Wilco's to get like a bathroom like silicone sealant, and she mixed like washing up liquid and she created a mould that way, and I thought that's brilliant. Where was that method years ago when I needed it? So if it worked for her, then I assume that it will like work for someone else as well. And finally, this is the last slide, which like is the places that I tend to go to when I first think about the think about the project. I tend to look for the places that is like the most cheapest. And like I would say that honestly, if you live anywhere like near London, or you live in London, or you're going down there for like a trip, I would totally recommend you go to this place called Walthamstow, which is northbound of the Victoria line. And this is like, honestly to God, the best place I've ever been to like buy like really sparkly fabrics, because things like Duchess satin, for example, that would probably cost you about £6, £8, £10 a metre. You can find it for £3 a metre at this place. And it's like, not just that, you can also find things like brocade for about £2 as well. And it's just like, literally, it was like mindful when I first discovered this place. I was just like, I'm going back here for all my fabrics. I mean, and it's like, just so you know, like pretty much all my fabrics like for this jacket was actually from this place, and that's how my jacket actually, I think I spent about £36 on this jacket. It wasn't really that much at all, which is actually quite cheap for a detailed piece like this. This is how cheap this place is. And obviously you've got other like high street stores as well. Even John Lewis does things like patterns, and of course we've got good old Coscraft as well. They did not bribe me to actually put that there, but it is there for an option. It's an option. And with that, I'm done. Don't know if anyone wants to ask me any kind of questions, or we can save it towards the end. Right, in that case. So, hope everyone enjoys the rest of the Minami. Okay, thank you very much for coming.